The real blockbuster this weekend, Liverpool against Brighton. This is the game you're strapping in for. This is the big one, the title. No, it's not. Brighton come to Anfield. Liverpool off the back of a defeat to Manchester United in what was the most bizarre FA Cup game I've ever watched in my life. And Brighton actually come here with a half-decent record. The last 4 games, they've only lost once to Liverpool. They beat Liverpool 3-0. I think that was when Trossard scored a hat-trick, possibly. And then there's been 2 draws, but there's always goals in this fixture. As a Liverpool fan, I just said off air, I don't fancy Liverpool to win this. That's not the spoiler. We're going to look at where this game will get decided. Liverpool have a few players returning from injury. No Trent still, I'm led to believe. Robertson may be out. Brighton have been so injury hit all season. They're one of those teams that no one's been fair. Like, we haven't spoken about Brighton's injuries, and they've done well to some extent to get to this point. Liverpool come into this thinking 2 hours after we play, it's the 2 big sides in the league. Quite simply put, Liverpool have to win this game. But how do they beat this Brighton side who have been such a banana skin for them?
This is the weekend, and I always say it to my friends, like, kickoff times matter.
Yep.
They do matter, especially this time of the season, because the pressure is different. And I feel like Liverpool know that they have to win, but the fact they're playing before Arsenal and Man City, I think is actually an advantage. If you take a zoom out and you look at where these 2 teams in terms of Liverpool and Brighton were last season, in this exact same fixture, it's very different. It was De Zerbi's first game. It was exciting football. Everyone's like, what do we expect from this Brighton side that have lost Graham Potter, who's a great manager, but De Zerbi's really showing that they're going to play exciting stuff. And Liverpool were in the mud. Liverpool going through terrible form, and obviously they picked up to the back end, managed to qualify for the Europa League. But it's interesting how different it is. We see these vacancies, and De Zerbi's not really being linked with these jobs because Brighton have had such a poor season, partly because of injuries. And Liverpool, like I said, it's date with destiny. It feels like Klopp's last season, they've really got the bit between their teeth. And the Liverpool team that I think lack quality, going to this game against Brighton, knowing that if we just play our best football, we should win this game. And I don't think that was the case for a lot last season. Liverpool not wowed me, the style of football, but what has wowed me is how determined, the grit that they've shown in games where they shouldn't really have won. Obviously, the game against Manchester United was a crazy game that nobody can legislate for. But I think like if Liverpool play their best football, I don't think Brighton stand much of a chance. They went out with a whimper in the Europa League against Roma. I know they won the second leg, or the second leg was close, but the first leg was an indictment, and really telling in terms of where Brighton are this season. They're way off of what they were last year. And I think that Liverpool, with the bit between their teeth and a goal to reach, I think Liverpool will be comfortable winners in this one.
I think so too. And I think with the kickoff time thing, I think Kweku's got a really valid point. I just think in this situation, where your 2 biggest rivals are then going up against each other later, and there is a real possibility that finishes in the draw, I think Liverpool have the advantage this weekend because they can get 3 points on the board, sit back and relax, and whatever happens in that game, they know they've done their bit. If I compare that to maybe Arsenal a few weeks ago, where they were playing afterwards in a game that they were expected to win, it can work out really, really differently. And, the pressure is there, obviously. But I look at Brighton this season, and although their league position is very respectable, and you got to factor in the injuries that you mentioned, and you got to factor in the fact they've tried to juggle Premier League with Europe as well. You have to say that they've done okay, but I just don't look at them in the same light anymore. And I don't think they're going to turn up at Anfield and produce any sort of surprise. They just seem to be a little bit more soft-centered than they were at the start of De Zerbi's reign.
I think they've lost a bit of the spark. And when De Zerbi first came on the scene in the Premier League, it was a brand new thing for everyone. And so his style of play, which was complemented by Pep Guardiola as well, people were immediately like, this is the new way to play. And this is the guy. Unfortunately, with the style of play that De Zerbi wants to play, you also demand a certain level of technical quality. And if you're constantly chopping and changing players, the technical quality will drift and come up and down. Yes, we have said Liverpool won't lose this game. There's a great stat here. Liverpool haven't lost back-to-back games since March last year, when they lost to Real Madrid, Man City and Bournemouth in the space of a month. I do want to touch on another area for Liverpool. We obviously spoke about individual quality. Mo Salah's back, which I've said this many times on the show, is more important than anything else in the Premier League and more important than any other player. 24 goal involvements. Obviously, the stick that people are beating with at the moment is Liverpool survived without him. But how much of a lift is this guy overall at this stage of the season?
It's massive. He's still, for me, the best player in the Premier League when he's on form, when he's fit, and when he's firing. And he's a difference maker. He's proven himself to be that over a number of years now. This isn't a flash in the pan. This is Mo Salah, the real deal. So it's a massive boost for Liverpool to get him back at the right time. And I think Liverpool have been quite clever in the way that they've managed his return to fitness. It looked like he was back. Then he wasn't. They were really, really careful, really, really cautious. And now they're hoping to have him involved in the running. I think obviously Liverpool have got Europa League to look at as well. But I think the fact that they're in the slightly weaker European competition and that they can probably make changes in that, maybe not use Mo Salah in that and have him fresh for the Premier League, could be a real difference maker here.
I'm talking about difference makers. Evan Ferguson was supposed to be a difference maker for Brighton. He struggled this season. Hasn't scored a goal for a long time. And the amount of hype that he had at the beginning of the season, people were talking about 100 mil in the summer. And that's reflective in the struggles in front of goal for Brighton. They've scored 2 goals in their last 5 games in all competitions. And it's tough because the Brighton that we knew last season, they were creating chances, they were giving people problems, they were scoring goals from all angles. And I feel like when there's so much turnover, when you lose the quality in the side, I know they weren't necessarily goal threats, but you lose the McAllister, you lose the Caicedo, and all of a sudden the side looks very different. And if you have a few injuries, the side looks a lot weaker. So I think you can legislate for some of Brighton's poor form as a result of that. But someone like Evan Ferguson, who's supposed to be their difference maker, not scoring goals on a consistent basis, where they would have relied on him this season, is part of the reason why Brighton struggled this season. I say struggling, they're ahead of Chelsea in the Premier League, so I can't really talk, but it's just there's something missing when you watch Brighton. There's a spark missing, and as a result of that, I think that Liverpool will look at this game as a game they have to get 3 points in.
To be fair to Roberto De Zerbi, though, I think he always knew that Evan Ferguson wasn't ready to be that guy every single week. And people used to say, why is Evan Ferguson in and out of the team? Well, Roberto De Zerbi recognised, I think, quite early that he's still very young, still very raw. And, we know that De Zerbi likes to rotate generally, but I think he has shown us that he was not convinced about Ferguson. And maybe there was a bit of hype in the media, maybe that, went above and beyond what he's actually capable of at this stage in his career.
He's been a little bit unlucky though, because of Brighton's form, they haven't been creating as many chances like Kweku said. There is a couple of positives, and Ciso is back. João Pedro could be back for the weekend's game. He's the top scorer with 8 in the league, and Estupinian is now fully fit, although his form's been very patchy since he's come back. Pascal Gross has been in unbelievable form this season. What a player. I actually think outside of the top 6, he's the most talked about player that we've spoken about.
I think it's the profile. He's not sexy, his PR's not the highest, but Pascal Gross, if he was 4 or 5 years younger, we're talking about ridiculous fees, because he's had to carry a lot of that creative burden for Brighton this season. I think he's got the most assists in the Premier League, joint most assists in the Premier League, which is incredible for a side that are not scoring goals. I think a lot of that came in the first half of the season. But yeah, he's a player that they rely on a lot, and he can do so many different things. We see him dropping into different positions, and he's the one player that I've watched live in the flesh, and he's so much better than when you watch him on TV. He does so many different things for a team, and he's going to have to be at his best for Brighton to get anything in this game.
Brighton currently, you were literally talking about their lack of creativity. Their average XG per game this season is 1.63. For context, if you're wondering what that means, Mo Salah is averaging 1.19 goal involvements per 90. So effectively, Salah's scoring or assisting every single game. Brighton have an XG for that, but they don't actually do that. So really, we've pretty much said since the get-go, Liverpool are massive favourites. I will add a psychological edge to that because Liverpool play early in the easier game, there is still pressure that comes with that. It's not a given that you'd play their side that are weaker and go, well, we beat these guys. Because if you don't, you've just handed the keys to Arsenal and City to go, this is you two in this title race, and now we're on the back burner because the fixtures will pile up later and further down the line. I also want to talk about Joe Gomez. I think, have we ever spoken about him? Not in here. We haven't spoken about Joe Gomez on the Football Forecast. This is a disgrace. Producers, let's fix this. He's been unbelievably good this season for Liverpool. Played left back, played right back, played centre back at times. Some of these stats are unbelievably impressive. I wonder with Joe Gomez, Robertson potentially could be injured, but if he isn't, he's going to be switched out to right back. And I've started to think, actually, he's a better left back than he is a right back because of the positioning.
Yeah.
So Liverpool often, you have Conor Bradley and Trent who push on down that right-hand side, and your left back effectively becomes your left centre-back, which is why Liverpool were desperate for Josko Gvardiol. Because he can do that, because he's a right-footed left back, so when the ball comes in from the opposite side, you're sweeping with your favoured side. I think he suits that so much more than being at right back and getting asked to go and do Trent's job, for example. What is the truth with this guy? Is he as good as we're saying? I know James Walcott, who's not here today, doesn't agree with Joe Gomez being underrated. He thinks he's just okay.
Yeah. He's a Swiss Army knife, and he can do a lot. And he was in great form when people were saying he probably should start for England before he had that horrific injury a couple of years ago. There's a Van Dijk tax of everything. There's a Van Dijk tax of everything, because if you think about the Liverpool game against City a few weeks ago, it had Kelleher in goal. You had Conor Bradley at right back. Centre back, you had Kwanzaa next to Van Dijk, and then left back, you had Joe Gomez. Any other centre back who's playing with those guys, I'm not degrading any of those guys, but if any other centre back plays those guys, that's a massacre against the Man City team that have Erling Haaland up top. Van Dijk makes everybody look better, and I think the leadership that he brings to that back line is the reason why Joe Gomez is flourishing. And when we saw him in his best form a couple of years ago, it was playing as a centre back next to Van Dijk. And so it remains to be seen. I think he's perfectly rated. I think the people are acknowledging that Joe Gomez is playing good football right now, but he's not necessarily a transformative defender. And if Trent and Robertson are fit, then I don't think Joe Gomez starts for Liverpool.
I think systems make players, and somebody like Joe Gomez, as you say, is really suited to playing that left back role because of what the left back role entails in that particular Liverpool side. He's played there 43% of his minutes this season. He's played quite a bit at right back as well. Not that many minutes, interestingly, though, at centre back, which is what we all thought was his position when he came through. I think he's one of those players that kind of falls into the category of really useful squad player, but will he ever be elite in any one of those positions? I don't think he will be. I think this is Joe Gomez benefiting from filling in the absence of players that play roles that he's just really suited to at this moment in time. I wouldn't be building the next Liverpool if I was coming in to replace Jurgen Klopp around Joe Gomez at the back, for example.
Yeah.
I disagree. We're out of time, thankfully, so I don't have to disagree too ferociously. I'll give my score prediction because I feel like both of you are going to be like 5-0. I think it'll be 2-1, tight game. Brighton will create chances because Liverpool do leave spaces at the back, and there's no Alisson. So that's what I'll go with. Harry?
Liverpool 2, Brighton 0.
3-1 Liverpool.